sure that we're recognizing the behavior as a teachable moment. And then of course we want to encourage our attendance. I think I have that on 2 different slides, but I do want to say that I'm trying to figure out how to encourage attendance and still be very respectful of health and welfare. And so that picture that looks like a big giant rectangle is actually one of 4 backstops that we have at Frank Zeke for kickball and Foursquare and stuff like that. And so we're actually going to start doing a minimum attendance of 96%.
just shy of 19 million of projects we have in the bin right now we'll be submitting on against that eligibility. So this is match money. We have our GEO bond. Every dollar we spend on modernization, we're eligible for a portion. Whether that will be funded is still, we'll see, but we are moving forward. We are applying for it. We've also applied for the TKK projects that we're doing. We've applied to the state for that grant. That grant is overfunded to the tune of or underfunded to the tune of about $1 billion. But hopefully the state will put in more money on it. We'll see. There's another round of funding starting in February when we intend to apply for all of our other projects on that one as well. So end with a little ray of sunshine. Some of the past projects we've done, and in this case, the solar arrays at Eagle Peak, Calpella, and Grace Hudson. Last calendar year, PG&E goes by calendar years, not our fiscal years, because they're, I don't know, PG&E, maybe sensible, maybe not. We produced over 1 million kilowatt hours of electricity. There's some really great graphics there. It's a feel-good moment. Among other things, it definitely lowers our carbon footprint. It also hit our bottom line, so almost $200,000. Honestly, probably more than that. I took the very baseline lowest estimate. I think we came in quite a bit higher than that, but the way PG&E does their net metering, it's hard to get an exact number. So that was definitely, it's a win for us, and it's a win for our students. Any questions?
Trustee Arkin.
I don't have a question. What I have is, I just wanted to let you know, I saw Eagle Peak a week ago, and I hadn't been out there for a while because of COVID. Couldn't do anything. And the grounds look wonderful. The back with the basketball court, I was shocked. It was just so expansive and fun. I mean, it's always fun for the kids to do that, but they were just post sort of before, or it looked that way. Now it really looks part of the school, and also the enclosed area for the so-called younger kids, but I bet all the kids use it, and that is, it's wonderful what you guys have done. It really looks like a school.
Well, I appreciate that, Bea.
Yeah, I mean, thank you. Well, thank you guys.
Trustee Van Sant, no? Any other questions? Thank you very much. Are we doing something with this?
No,
No?
it's just informational.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Gabe.
So next is our elementary school boundaries presentation.
Great, thank you. First, I really want to thank Gabe and his team. We blew through that presentation pretty quickly. Hours went into the presentation. Years have gone into the work that they've done, and it's just a huge thanks to you and your team. Again, they've done a lot with not a lot, and we're in pretty good shape, all things considered. Okay, so on to our elementary school boundary studies. This is the first of what will probably be several conversations about this over the next few months. As you may recall, back in March, Rob Murray from King Consulting was here and gave us an update on our on our district enrollment projections for the next few years. And the next piece of that work was then to start looking at our elementary school boundaries. We know some of our schools have more students than they can really accommodate, and some have some room for some more students. So Rob has put together a presentation for tonight that'll get the conversation started. Again, it's not an action item tonight. What we are looking for is some direction for maybe some things we should think about and consider as we move forward with this. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Rob.
Hey, thank you, Steve, and welcome, Superintendent, members of the board. Always good to be back in Ukiah. So I think we've gotten a good introduction to our subject. So first, just a quick overview of what we're going to be looking at tonight. You'll get a full update to those demographics and projections a little bit later on this fall, but for right now we have just using the current year enrollments and just making some adjustments to what came in where and how that's affected some of the trends. We're going to just look ahead at the elementary schools for what our enrollment looks like over the next several years. Just a quick refresh of what your current boundaries look like, how your students live relative to those boundaries, a quick overview of school capacities, because some of your schools are a little bit better equipped to hold more students than others. And then we're just going to show an example of what a boundary adjustment could look like that hits some of the points that will have been brought up to that point. And by no means is this saying this is the one way forward. This is just an example of what this process might look like, pending, as Steve said, probably quite a bit of conversation on this one. So first off, that projection. The darker line there, now this is just TK5, and that's the caveat, of course, is your configurations. It's a little bit hard to look, given that you have schools that range from TK4 up through TK6. But in this case, we're just looking at TK5 as a kind of easy to make uniform across the board here, baseline of just what this population looks like. And the main reason I wanted to highlight this tonight is that largely due to that rollout of transitional kindergarten and the growth you'll still have for 3 more years as more students are eligible to come to you a little bit sooner, what that means for your elementary enrollment district-wide is staying pretty close to where you have been now for the last couple of years. And what that also means then is this is a good time to look at those elementary boundaries, because you're not dealing as much with kind of trying to make some adjustments in the middle of your total population really increasing or decreasing by a large amount. So again, those boundaries that you have, you see kind of the inset map that shows the whole district with the Oak Manor extending all the way through the southern end of the district, the Calpella all the way through the northern end of the district, and then on the main part of the map, the other schools that you have. And one thing that we'll just kind of point out is the 3 schools to your southern end there of Grace Hudson, Nokomis, and Ukiah are all just geographically fairly close to each other. And then as we see when we go to the next map of where students live, you certainly see the big, more than 600 students living in the Calpella boundary and the fewest living in the Nokomis boundary. And now here, just again, to make sure we're very clear on what data is used. Now, this is just all students who are enrolled in any elementary school. So 5th graders who are at Eagle Peak are not included in these numbers. 6th graders who are at Frank Zeke or Oak Manor are included in these numbers. But this is just all the students who are enrolled in an elementary school, and then what's the elementary boundary that they live in. And then this matrix was also included in the demographic analysis, but what this is showing is down each column is that boundary that students live in. So there's your 606 total for Calpella, there's your 299 total for Nokomis going down the columns. And you see that in every single boundary, there is at least one student who lives there and is going to one of your other schools. And then going across the rows, that's all the students who are enrolled there, and you can then see where they live and where they're coming from as you just read across. So aside from those totals that we just looked at in terms of the real big disparity in the residents, it's also very important to note that Grace Hudson is a little bit of a special case with these dual immersion program there, and you really see just reading across its row that you have large numbers coming from every other boundary in the district, and also in its column that you also have the largest number of people who are moving out to go to another school. And that's very, very common when you have that sort of special program at a site, that you also tend to get a lot more migration that gets tied into that. But even outside of that, I mean, just literally every combination that there is, you have someone who is moving that. And so that does factor into what we're looking at with wanting to balance the boundaries. But it's important to also note that some of this movement is not by choice. And we're really talking about Calpella here, from my understanding, in that you have there is not room at the school for everyone who lives in that boundary to be able to go there. And that's a big part of what we're wanting to balance out. And so a quick review when we talk about capacity. This is not necessarily a fixed number. You have a certain fixed number of classroom size spaces at every site. But it depends. If you have kindergartners in a classroom or if you have fourth graders in a classroom, that's a different number of students that you're fitting in. If you need some of those classrooms, for example, for a pull-out art program, for a resource room, for any number of things, then those are classrooms that, if you're going to maintain the ability to offer those services, are not necessarily available to hire a teacher and fill with kids. So that capacity can be a little bit different depending on how each of those rooms are utilized. So what we're looking at here are target capacities based on rooms that are available to have as classrooms without having to move out some other specialized use that wouldn't have any other place to go. Again, there's lots that can go into this, but the other factor, of course, is that some of that capacity is also currently provided by portable classrooms that you've had on these sites for a long time. Typical rule of thumb is about a 20-year expected useful life out of a portable classroom building. You've already got quite a few that are at or beyond that point. And so when we're looking at long-term planning capacity, we're also wanting to show what that looks like with only the permanent classrooms that you have at these sites. And so that gets us to a number that is still with your permanent capacity and all your elementary school students. If you look at these last two columns, those two numbers in total are actually pretty close to being in line. But, especially I've highlighted the two largest and smallest boundaries by number of kids who live in them. You don't necessarily have those classrooms where there are the most kids who are living, and that's exactly what we come to when we're looking at a boundary adjustment, is kind of 1A, adjusting the boundaries so that there is not a situation where if everyone who lives in the school wants to go there, you have to get creative with determining who gets to go and who doesn't, because they won't all fit. And then the other one is when you have schools like you do at Nokomis that has more capacity that's not being fully utilized, that you do want to be able to just have people understand that that's the school that we'd like them to be assigned to. And as you said, you have an open enrollment district. You saw how much movement there is. Just because someone is assigned to a school doesn't mean that they don't have other options. But it does, again, mean trying to make this so that going forward, you have a little bit better alignment between how many kids are living in the zone that's assigned to a school and how many kids realistically could actually go there. And then that last one, just building up on the presentation that you saw from Gabe, is also we have the column with once those new TK rooms are at the sites, we are adding that capacity on. And that's, again, that's really what gets you up to the point where you have that permanent capacity that's in line with the elementary students. But there, again, certainly will still be some sites, as we see, where, as I'll show you on the kind of the proposed example of a way we could move forward to align these a little better. At Calpella, we're still going to be aiming for something that's within that total capacity, which means we're still depending on portable classrooms that aren't getting any younger to provide that capacity. That's something that will certainly be important in some of the other conversations that will be up in front of us tonight. So again, those potential adjustments. So I really started this exercise again with Calpella being the first issue to look at, which is finding the smallest area to move out of Calpella and bring the total population of elementary students who live in that boundary to within a level that is within that school's total target capacity. And again, we're not gonna, obviously the far northern parts of the district, the areas that are right next to Calpella, we're not really under consideration to move. We're really looking at areas that are near other existing boundaries And so, and I'll show more detailed maps of all these areas, and we'll kind of look at the exact areas in question. But in this case, looking at Frank Zeke as the next closest school, we would just shift some territory out of Calpella that would now be assigned to Frank Zeke. And then to keep Frank Zeke from then having the same issue and having way too many kids living in its boundary, there is a not corresponding, but a smaller shift that goes out of Frank Zeke and into Ukiah, and then kind of evening out the shapes a little bit, taking some of the area on the very eastern boundary of Ukiah, and again keeping Ukiah from being too large, and now being able to move in some students who could then help utilize some of the classrooms that are at Nokomis. And so again, just there are, with the current year student list, just over 100 students, 103 students who are in this area, up to on the left side, up as you go north on 101, up to Parducci Road, and then the neighborhoods or the streets that are right off of Lake Mendocino Drive, and then everything south of that that feeds onto the highway would then be what is now the Frank Zeke boundary, if this particular scenario were to move forward. And then, again, taking everything that is south of Low Gap, that's currently in the Frank Zeke boundary, and shifting that into Ukiah. That's about 71 students right now, and then 147 students in Ukiah in all this area to the east side of the railroad/bike trail area. And just extending that leg of Nokomis that already comes up just to capture a further area. And this is, again, where just kind of pointing out just some of the realities that just are a little tricky is that, again, you just have some sites that are very close together in the south side, and we're really trying to find ways to distribute students to the north side of the district. And so some of the shapes are not as clean as we can, but just if everyone were assigned to their closest school, that's some of what you have now, and you wind up, again, in a situation like Calpella where there just is not the space for that to happen. And again, the main thing that we really want to do is make sure that if a kid or a family moves into a house, they know what their school of assignment is, that if they try to register for that school, they're not told, sorry, there's no room, you'll have to go somewhere else. And so we look at that same table again with what it would look like under these boundaries. And you can now see Calpella at least would be down under its total capacity, and Nokomis now utilizing a lot of that permanent capacity. Grace Hudson and Oak Manor are not touched under this one. And then Frank Zeke is still staying just a little higher than its permanent only capacity, but well within its total. So again, just one example of some of the things that we're looking at, and this is a few things. So certainly we can consider, as we talked a little bit about with the trustee areas, many just variations and different options that can be brought up and explored. But one thing I'm actually going to jump to the bottom part is what I kind of touched on but didn't get into fully, is that the grade configuration is another aspect of all of this. Because again, we were just looking at all the kids that are enrolled in an elementary school now. But if sixth graders were to all go to middle schools, then that, again, makes fewer of those elementary kids and just makes it a little easier for them. That doesn't really affect Calpella, though. So there are a number of things, but but grade configurations can make it so that fewer total students have to be moved in the elementary schools to achieve some of that same kind of balance, potentially. And then in kind of practicality, you would certainly have some things of when these boundaries would take effect. It's quite common to say that once you are enrolled in a school, even if your boundary changes, that you continue with that school to the extent that you can. Often then siblings are given priority to attend the same school as an older sibling, so parents only have a single drop-off that they have to make. But those are just all questions that come into it of how quickly you want those changes to take effect, because you see kind of just a gradual balancing as that happens, but you at least start moving in the right direction. But if you need to achieve everything as quickly as possible, there is that just hard 1 year to the next reassignment. But again, that's probably much less common to have that happen. But just, again, some of those considerations that we can talk about. So that's the initial presentation. I expect there might be a little bit of just things to consider on this. So I'm happy to answer questions about anything that we've shown, or things that would be good to look into for you to know in the future, or just for me to record thoughts that people have.
Quick questions. Trustee Van Sant?
Thank you for this. I appreciate it. And it's well laid out. I do have to say that my initial hunch is I'm not loving the Nokomis strategy there. So I'm having a hard time seeing the cohesion in that district with that little piece up there. That's just my initial thought. So the Calpella movement makes some sense to me, but I would defer to you beyond that, and maybe you, Fred. I don't know that region as well as I know the interior of Ukiah, but I'm just not feeling comfortable with the Nokomis setup.
And again, if I could jump in real quick, this is in no way a recommendation or a suggestion. It's just the first thing you would look at in trying to adjust these boundaries is just moving everything. And obviously, that's not a good solution. We know that, but it's just a
You do?
conversation starter.
Okay.
Yeah. It's,
So wait, then tell me what we're doing. So these are not things we're supposed to comment on right now?
you're welcome to, but I think this is going to take us some time iterating, just like with the trustee area maps. Okay, here's a bad idea. Let's make it a little better.
Okay, I didn't.
Let's make it a little better.
Okay.
That is really what we're trying to do here today. And if you have other considerations about moving a grade from here to there or doing a magnet school, things like that as well, we could be talking about that would impact how we do this. But I want to stress why this is so critical is because we are designing our campuses for the future. We're deciding how many TK classrooms to put on each of these campuses, how many portables to replace, how much money are we going to have. Knowing what kids are going to be where is critical for us to kind of nail down the next few months. The sixth grade question is a big one. We're going to need to move sixth grade around probably for construction reasons anyway. Do we put them back afterwards? That's something that you guys have to talk about and decide. So we can make recommendations or suggestions, but for this isn't even a suggestion. This was just, here's
okay.
the simplest approach to how you would do this, and we know it's fraught with problems.
So I guess one of the considerations I would like to keep in mind, but you brought up some other ones that would maybe influence this. I think one of the advantages our district has had compared to other areas is that the socioeconomic demographics of our elementary schools are all roughly around the same, and I think that's really important. I don't want to build a community where we have one school that's much wealthier than the other. I don't think that's good for the students. I don't think it's good for the district. And we've been kind of fortunate that our elementary schools are roughly around the same socioeconomic status balance. So that caught my attention about the Nokomis thing. So to me, that's an important consideration. I love ideas of magnet schools everywhere, so I hope the board would consider that as well. I mean, I know that's a big endeavor, but I don't see any downside to those in a general conceptual sense. I'll have to say about the sixth grade, I have felt that, we have a few holdouts, right, at Frank Zeke, Oak Manor, and Ukiah. And I know the sixth grades are kind of small. If I remember, it's just one or two classrooms. To me, it's felt like they're just sort of there. Maybe we should move them to Pomalita. But I'm also really cognizant that Pomalita is already a really big school. So that's just something that kind of catches my attention, that is a large middle school. I don't know how much that matters, adding another 100 kids or not, but it is big. And so that part gives me a little bit of pause.
Trustee Arkin?
I was looking at the Redwood Valley one, of course, and trying to remember the different times, and Carolyn would remember, I remember 2 shifts that we did there, and one was many years ago, because of the numbers. And we were losing some, so we brought it down. And that's when we got into, I think, the part of Lake Mendocino and stuff like that. It was kind of up and down like that for a while. And then it happened again many years later when we had Eagle Peak. No, that was the time when it happened with Eagle Peak. And then the second time it happened was when we decided to go STEM with Eagle Peak, and trying to figure out how to encourage, or who to encourage and which way to encourage. And that's when it came all the way back down, and went and picked up some of the Frank Zeke kids. And I understand that we might need to do that, but I know how disruptive that can be. I know I will get many complaints from parents having to make that shift for their kids. But if we just take sort of the outer edges will not be as bad initially if we let them know slowly but surely about who will be involved in that and when they will be involved in that. And the problem is everybody really likes to go everywhere. And so all of a sudden saying to them, okay, these are your schools and that's what you have to go to. But we're so spread out, and families live and I work in Ukiah and live all over the place, or vice versa. And so they sort of have found a niche for themselves. And so it's not like it seems to be an even mess everywhere. And I don't know if making it a so-called fair mess or anger about stay in your boundary area will really be that helpful.
Trustee Kippinger?
I was just going to say I agree with the thinking outside the box, maybe looking at providing other opportunities to get families to kind of make shifts and balance out. If we just change the lines on a piece of paper, I mean, a lot of families it's going to take years for us to really see any kind of movement. I don't think that people will respond. So if we find a way to kind of get that movement, with like Eagle Peak did with the STEM program, I think that would be much more effective and beneficial.
I don't know that we're going to be able to meet your timeline of a couple months, because a STEM or a magnet school would take a long time. And I agree, moving the boundaries any which way would also take a long time, because I wouldn't be interested in uprooting people one year to the next. So it would probably be gradual so I think it's a real tricky situation.
Yeah, and this can be a very long and very tricky process, and it depends how much we try to do. And again, a lot of families and a lot of communities have ties to schools that we want to be really respectful of as well. And so it's going to be an interesting process. But again, you can see how out of whack the numbers are. We have to look at it and try to do something. How far we can actually get with this is going to be interesting. And you're right, it will take time, because we're not just going to say, sorry, you have to go here now. We're going to let you finish your time at your school, and if you have siblings, we're probably going to let them finish at that school too. So it is going to take time
gradual
to roll through, for sure.
And I too, always love magnet school ideas. But
Can I,
Did you, yes, Trustee?
did Superintendent Cuban have something to add? No? I mean, it feels to me like we might, as a board, kind of figure out the order here, because I think that communicating about siblings and whether you have to move this year kind of goes last. And it feels like, I'm not sure if it would make sense to do boundary adjustments until we've made a decision. I mean, 6th grade seems like a decision we should make.
Yeah.
And this concept of doing a magnet school, I'm really intrigued by that idea, because as we know, we have some financial resources that are unusual right now. And, about measure just passed yesterday about arts and music instruction. If we made like an arts-focused school, this would be good time for that. So I do think the timing is right to have that conversation again. I understand, like, you know, a magnet school takes some time to plan, and it doesn't need to happen like overnight, but I'm not sure we should adjust the boundaries till we've made some of those other decisions.
Right. I don't think he was saying we should. I think he was saying.
Well, he kind of wants us to, because if they have to plan TK, and I mean, I understand we can't make all these decisions quickly, but you've got some other things that are important.
We need to get the conversation started tonight, and we need to keep it moving for the next several months. So the sooner we decide, the better. We understand it's not going to be decided next month.
Trustee Arkin?
You know, talking about doing it sort of little by little in certain sense, I think the decision would start with 6th grade. That's a small number, though it's a real tough one. You know, the parents and kids, parents more really, who want, I understand, forever been those issues of keep my kid protected from all these bad kids, but which aren't. But that I think it'd be important to decide if that's kind of how we wanted to go, and then added with that is, would we like to also do a magnet school and kind of bring that along? That, to me, that was a more effective thing to do when we did Eagle Peak. When we turned it into a STEM school, than it is to throw everybody in chaos, you know. And so maybe we should think about somehow about 6th grade.
Sure.
So, Trustee Van Sant?
I think along those lines, I wouldn't mind some information about programmatically what's the pros and cons of 6th grades in elementary school campuses, because we do know parents may have some strong feeling about something, which I don't want to discount, but I actually don't know if there's academic or behavioral truths about whether 6th grade is a plus or a minus on an elementary school campus. We could be like super outside the box and make Nokomis like a 5-8 school that's an arts focus. Look at that wild idea, to pull out all the 6th graders and reduce the size of Pomalita. I know, Deb's like, what is that?
That would take care of the overcrowding at the elementary, but.
Because Nokomis is kind of underutilized right now. Pomalita's pretty big. There would be a sort of, you know, artsy alternative to a large traditional middle school. I'm just making stuff up here. But my point is that programmatically I'd be interested in some of these things, because that's not where my level of expertise is.
Trustee Barrett?
I think we have to remember that 6th grade is already at a middle school setting in Redwood Valley. And 6th grade at Pomalita is pretty much secluded. It's by itself. So, you know, there's some things that are already in place. And it's only, 3 classrooms, I think, of 6th grade that are at elementary schools. So, anyway.
When we bring this back, we will include 6th grade in this, and so you can see the capacities there as well at Eagle Peak and Pomalita, because that is part of the conversation too. And so
You mean whether Pomalita has room for 6? Right,
They
that's what
do.
I was wondering
Yeah.
too, yeah.
they do.
Okay, so you are not looking for any direction tonight, is that correct? I mean,
well,
specific direction? You're
We've heard this map doesn't work. We didn't think that it did, but we've confirmed that, so thank you.
Was the plan to bring a map we hated? Was that the
I
vision?
think though, but I think to be fair, I think any map is going to be really problematic, because you can't just lay out something beautiful. You're going to have to move lines to accommodate the numbers. So I don't think we should have the expectation that we're going to see a map and be like, oh, that makes perfect sense, because the numbers don't play out that way.
I think with our geography
I'm
and
looking
where
for a
our
perfect
people live now, you wouldn't put the 6 schools we have where they are. But,
Right.
but we can't move them, so therefore we've got to figure out maps that work.
And
one way or the other.
Ukiah and Nokomis being so close, you can't move that boundary up.
Yeah, and
for
that's-
Nokomis.
I was going to
Unless
mention,
you make it
I
to
was
5,
well
8.
aware of what we were looking at with this particular shift into Nokomis, but yeah, I mean, everything that's closer to Nokomis, you're already just 2 blocks away from Ukiah with that boundary, and then I know just with the program at Grace Hudson, there are special considerations around really taking anything out of that boundary. from,
Right.
as I understand it.
So that may
we're-
not be a great map, but I don't know that any will.
Yeah,
I do
so-
want to, I'm sorry, and I know Superintendent Cuban's speaking here, but I do want to leave room for just like not doing anything with the boundaries, because I think that Trustee Arkin is right. We seem to have a culture of letting people kind of go where they want. And I just,
But it's the priority if you remember. But Superintendent Cuban?
I am hearing from the board, though, that you want some information coming back about sixth grade, which we can do. We can get it in the boundary study. You know, the bottom line is we're going to have to do something. I think many of you were on the board when we decided to put a magnet program at Eagle Peak, and you heard the presentation about the impact, for example, at Frank Zeke, the classroom impact, the size of the property, all of that. I think we all remember that. So I feel like there's something that we have to do, even though we don't want to. And just tossing another crazy idea out, and I don't, you know, Nokomis is smaller. Maybe we make that a K-6 program and the rest of our elementary schools a K-5, just to put more kids going to Nokomis to ease some of the burden that would come on to Pomalita. And in terms of a 7-8 school, I feel like that is a really short transition for kids. You know, being in a school for 3 years versus being in a school for 2 years, you create more of a home and an identity when you're there for longer. And also hugely unpopular, we also talked about potentially moving fourth grade and having a K3 and a 4-8 up at Calpella Eagle Peak. I know it was unpopular. There are configurations of schools like that out there. There are all sorts of potential things.
Okay, so do you have enough to go on for next time?
Rob's got a page of notes here, so I'm thinking so.
Yeah, so no, so yeah, we can kind of talk about the extent to which we want to kind of show with quantitatively what some of these ideas might look like with projected enrollment, you know, in certain areas going forward. So, but yes, this was exactly, I think, what we were hoping for, is just to hear, and I kind of hedged it a little bit even in the presentation, but just talking about the lines on the map is really just a part, and you brought up a lot of the other wing of this whole conversation of things that can minimize or even entirely eliminate the need to move the boundaries around if some of the same results can be accomplished by some other configurational moves. So I'll get to work on looking at that so that I can get back to you on the extent to which that might be the case. And like you said, if, as Trustee Van Sant said, if there's a way to not do this at all, then
well,
I could
I
let
heard
you know
really
that.
clearly from the superintendent that it sounds like it is necessary. So I didn't
Yeah.
mean to shut down the whole concept of changing the boundaries, but it does feel like some programmatic decisions might be made first, and then
Yes,
look at
something needs to be done. We just have to figure out what something means.
Okay, well, thank you. So
Okay.
we will be seeing you again.
Yes, thank you.
But you're probably not going very far, because now we are going to the discussion of the latest draft of the developer fee study. And
Can I add one more thing?
Yes.
I know one of our elementary schools is interested in exploring not the grade configuration of your concept, but the idea of a magnet school program focused on music and art. So may not be in the right location, but there is interest in that. And with the passage of Proposition 28, I think, we're going to get some art and music money to the district, but it sounds like it has to get allocated out by school site. So anyway, we're learning all about that proposition.
Debbie, is there any public comment? No? No. Okay, so moving on to discussion of the latest draft of developer fee study.
Great, and we don't really have a formal presentation on this tonight. We just wanted to get the latest draft of the study that Rob and his team at King Consulting have been poring over for months. We feel pretty good about where this has gotten to at this point, and we think it's ready. So we will be bringing it back next month. There will be 2 resolutions. First, there will be a public hearing, and then there will be a resolution that the board can consider to adopt the study. And then if the board adopts the study, the board can then consider a second resolution to begin implementing the fees again. So if you have any questions about the study, we're happy to answer them tonight, especially since Rob is here as well. But that, again, it's not really a formal presentation. I do have a couple of slides. If you can go to the other presentation. Trustee, Deb and I met with a couple of the county supervisors along with Trustee Nelson, and we talked about this whole process and why we were looking at doing this again. And it became clear as we talked to them that there were talking points that we really needed to emphasize. And so we've tried to give you a quick presentation on that. Do we have that, Deb?
It's not on the
I don't
agenda.
think he's seen
It's
it.
not attached.
Oh, okay. Well, I can tell you what the talking points are then. How's that? Because it's not very many. It's really not. But, and Gabe kind of alluded to this earlier. It's really what the state chooses to call a three-legged stool of funding. It's very poorly named because the legs are very, very different shaped. It would, something I would have built in a wood shop when I was 8 years old or something. But the state expects schools to fund facilities through three things: through local general obligation bonds, which we have; through state matching dollars, which match pennies on the dollar. They don't match dollar for dollar. And as Gabe showed, we have lots of eligibility, but when we actually get anything from the state, we don't know. And then developer fees is that third leg. The state expects school districts to be collecting developer fees. Most districts throughout the state do collect them. One of the big misconceptions with developer fees is that you have to be growing. Your enrollment has to be increasing to charge developer fees, and that is simply not true. These funds are for the construction or reconstruction of school facilities. And so it's really important to make sure we emphasize that and understand that. You know, the state thinks it's so important that the state has several different pots of money they give schools, facilities money from. One is called the financial hardship. If we're not charging developer fees, we're not even eligible for that money. So again, the state expects us to be charging these developer fees. This transitional kindergarten that we've been talking about, having to build all these new classrooms, is definitely putting a strain on our Measure A budget. When we passed Measure A 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago, this transitional kindergarten wasn't a thing. And now we're having to spend a big amount of our bond money on these transitional kindergarten classrooms. These classrooms have to be Title V classrooms. They have to be bigger than the rest of our classrooms. They have to have restrooms. They have to have access to playgrounds. They have to have all sorts of things that make our life harder. And again, the state is helping pay for this theoretically. When they first started talking about it, it was going to be 80 cents on the dollar, I think. It's down to 50, and by the time we actually probably get the money, it's going to be maybe a quarter on the dollar, 40 cents on the dollar, who knows. Oh, there we go. It's okay. No, we were doing this late, so. So those are just some of the talking points about developer fees themselves. And in terms of the study that you have in the packet, and that we'll be talking about in more detail next month, the state prescribes how you go through these calculations. We didn't make up this calculation ourselves. It's basically a recipe. You follow the recipe, and then it becomes a math problem. And if the numbers support making the change, you make the change. So again, I'll back up really quick. We talked about the three legs of funding for school facilities: local general obligation bonds, which is our Measure A, the state aid piece, and developer fees. Again, we have to be eligible. We have to collect developer fees to be eligible for state financial hardship money, and developer fees are collected regularly all over the state. We talked about the need for transitional kindergarten, and the law is very clear. We cannot put transitional kindergarten students in portables. That's not even an option, even if we wanted to. Not that we would want to anyway. And then lastly, in terms of how this impacts folks in our community, and it's important to know this too, any additions to existing homes up to 500 square feet are exempt from developer fees. So if you're adding a 400 square foot extension to your house, you're adding a third bedroom or a fourth bedroom, or you're adding an ADU or something, you don't pay developer fees on those if they're under 500 square feet. If you're putting a new dwelling on your property, up to 500 square feet again is exempt from developer fees. And one of the concerns in the community is we have not rebuilt all of the homes that were lost to the fires still. Well, if you lost your home in a fire, if you have proof that you permitted 2,000 square foot house, you can rebuild up to 2,500 square feet on that same property and not pay any developer fees. So it's really important that people understand that. None of us want to have to be doing this. This is a stupid way for schools to raise money for facilities. It really is. It puts the board in a very difficult spot with the community. It's never popular. In most places, though, it's just a cost of doing business. Even for us here, I know one of the big developers is based in Chico that's doing some work here in town. They were surprised we weren't charging developer fees. It's just a cost of doing business most places. It just hasn't been here for a while. So with that, any questions or about the study or about these talking points?
Trustee Van Sant, is that up for, no? Does anybody have any questions or comments? I know we have already seen a presentation once, and we've had a couple public meetings.
Yep.
No? Great, then we will see you next month with this
We will.
item.
All right, thank you.
I already asked. I asked before we started the item.
Can I, just to remind us, so did you say that next month we're passing both resolutions, or is there a sequence?
That would be both resolutions.
And then, how soon after we pass that resolution does it become effective?
It's 60 days, so it'd actually be the day before Valentine's Day. If the board acts in December, it would
Okay.
be February 13th when the fees would start being collected.
So if a project received its permit before that, they would have gotten in before? Okay.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, next we have several first readings for revised board policy. 1, 2, 3, 4. Items E5 through E16. They will be coming back next month for approval on the consent. Any questions on any of these, or Superintendent Cuban, anything you wanted to highlight or not?
No, these are just updates to changes in the law.
Okay. Then
So no motion is
No
necessary?
motion, no,
Okay.
they'll be back next month on consent for approval. Next, we would have F1, Superintendent's Report.
Oh, wow, we're already there? Like, I don't know what to say. There is a lot going on in the district, and I just, this last month, we have done several great activities. We have been visiting classrooms together with our secondary and elementary principals, and I just want to express gratitude to our staff, our teaching staff. You know, you have a big group of 4 or 5 school administrators coming in your classroom. It can be a little nerve-wracking, but the kids have been lovely, and we often ask them what they're learning and why they're learning it, and they've just been, the staff and kids have been great. So we'll be doing that throughout this year. And we just recently had our data collaborative process where our site teams present their data to a group of colleagues, and they've shared that data with the staff, and they come up with their next steps related to the data that they're seeing. So we haven't done that process since fall 2019. So we are bringing some of those processes back, and gratitude to our secondary teams because we actually videotaped it. We are part of a consortium of school districts who are working together on improving our practice, and we will use a segment of our next session next Friday. We have to bring some pieces of our improvement work to share with each other, and so we'll actually share a segment of that video with these school districts across California and also learn from their practices. So it feels really great to get back to some sort of normalcy in our practices, and so that has been lovely. And I think that's all I will say, unless the board has any questions for me.
No, thank you. Busy. The board members report, does anyone have any knowledge to add to the board? Yes, Trustee Arkin.
Yes, I wanted to respond to Megan when you asked about parents being welcomed in the classroom. All the open houses that I went to, the one thing that was really neat is that every teacher had a little bulletin there that said what you could come and do in my classroom and what time. And so I do know that they're offering that, and that was both the middle school, I didn't do the high school, but I do know the middle schools as well as the elementary schools. They all had them, and they worked very hard to encourage parents, and because I guess some of the teachers, some of the kids were able to get a special bonus or points if their parents signed up for whatever. So they are starting to do that, so, yeah.
Trustee Barrett?
I attended the district advisory team this month, and I was very impressed with the number of parents and teachers and other school personnel who showed up at the meeting. How many were there, Katie? A lot.
More than we expected.
Yeah. And there were lots of really good questions and comments. And I believe this team is really looking forward to giving input on our strategic plan coming up. So anyway, it was a good meeting.
Thank you. Superintendent Cuban, do you have something else to add?
Yes, I forgot one thing. The board has been trying to fill trustee area 6 vacancy. No one filed for that seat. We did a 60-day recruitment process. No one applied. We will post for that trustee area one more time. So we are working with some community groups to try and get the word out. But if anyone out there listening knows of people interested in being on our board who live in trustee area 6, please encourage them to apply. We'll be getting that information out in the next week for this new round of applicants. And at our next meeting, we will be welcoming a new board member and saying incredible thanks to our outgoing board members at our next board meeting. So anyway, we're having some transition, and I'll just say we're really lucky in our district to have such stability in leadership, both at our school sites and district, but also at the board level. It really helps us do great work together. So.
And is the map on our website for trustee area 6?
Yes, the map is on our website, and thank you to Steve Barrickman and Rob. We have a street name. We've got a list of street names
On our website?
that it will be on our website. And so anyway, help us recruit somebody, please.
Okay. Well, you know, if I skip over, oh, no. G1. Is there a motion to expel student 03/11/10/2022 for the fall of 2022 and the spring 2023 school year?
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Nays or abstentions? Is there a motion to expel student 2/11/10/2022 for the fall of 2022 and the spring of 2023 school year?
I so move.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Abstentions or nays? Yep. Agree with consent. Moving along. To planning.
So our next planning is scheduled for Thursday, December 8th at noon.
December 8th did you say December 8th at noon?
Yeah, Thursday.
So Tyler should cover that one. Because he'll be taking over.
I haven't done it in a while.
Okay.
Shall I do it?
So Tyler and Megan. Let me see if I have that written down. December 8th at noon? All right then. Okay. Now, any topics that somebody would like to have considered for future agendas? No, terrible job of remembering that. No? Okay, great. Meeting adjourned then.